Hello, and thank you all for joining. My name is Luke Yango, and I am a financial planner in our firm. And today I'm going to be talking to you about ways to strategically manage your money while in a job transition. And before I begin, I do want to say to any clients on the line, if you're going through a job transition, reach out. Our job is to assist you during these times of change, so please do not hesitate to give us a call or set up time with us. But anyway, to begin, as always, a quick overview of compliance. And I do want to say any tax strategies that we're going to talk about, I would always recommend that you discuss them with a CPA. But to begin, let me first give you just a short overview of our firm. And for those of you who aren't clients on the line or just don't know us, this will give you a little bit of how we work with people. And we're a boutique wealth management and financial planning firm here in beautiful Irvine, California. However, we do have clients across the entire nation. And what we do with our clients, many of which are on the line, is we work with them on their holistic planning and investment management needs. We do find that our industry is a little too focused on just the investment side of things. So we make it a priority to take a comprehensive and a holistic approach to planning and to continuously educate, which is one of the reasons why we host these webinars. And our process involves first building a well designed financial plan, organizing our clients' investments in coordination with their planning, and then to ensure that any outside planning items have been handled, which may or may not involve our collaboration with other professionals like CPAs, attorneys, or just anyone in our client's advisory team. And here's a quick overview of our team. And within our firm, we have 7 financial planners. We have a retirement plan specialist, an investment specialist, and then 3 administrative staff members. Now, we do take pride in the work that we do. We love working with our wonderful clients. So, once again, for the clients on the call, thank you as always for placing your trust in us. But enough about us. Let's get into today's topic. And ultimately, what we are going to discuss today should help with 3 areas of the financial planning pyramid that you're seeing in front of you, which are cash flow, organization and control, and ultimately just less worry. And as you may or may not know, there is a lot that goes into holistic financial planning, much of which can be seen here on this diagram. However, these 3 areas are very important to plan for while in transition because they'll help to maintain your standard of living, will provide comfort, and will allow you to clearly think through decisions before going out and doing anything rash. And lastly, it will ensure that you're happy and doing well while you pursue that next chapter of your work life. So, for our agenda, what we're going to do is first discuss in great detail strategies to help manage cash flow, which I'm sure is top of mind for many of you. Secondly, we'll discuss tax. Being unemployed opens the door for an array of tax opportunities, which we are going to discuss today. And if you've been on any of my past webinars, you do know that I'm a little bit of a tax nerd. So this is always a fun conversation for me. Third, I'm going to go over some advice on the markets while in transition. And finally, we'll briefly spend some time on some of the varied investment based strategies that you may want to consider acting on while in transition, given some of the newfound time freedom that you may have. So let's jump right into it then with probably what's most top of mind for all of you, which is how to manage cash while in transition. Now, this is a big question on a lot of people's minds because you go from having this steady paycheck that you get, every 2 weeks to essentially nothing. And that alone can scare anyone. But what's worse is when you're forced into dipping into your savings or your investments. So, what are some of the strategies then to free up cash flow to make this less of a concern? Well, I have 11 that I want to discuss. So I'm going to spend a good deal of time on the next slide. So stay with me. And the first and the most important thing to review is going to be your budget and your spending. For many, this is not something that is too top of mind, but being in transition allows you to analyze and to understand where exactly your money is going. After reviewing, you may see the areas in which that you can adjust or remove in the interim to free up some cash flow. But this is always a good exercise so you can determine what exactly your needs are and what you must be spending money on. And then ultimately, you just feel more comfortable when you have those fixed expenses. Uh, your mortgage, for example. The second thing you can immediately act on is taking advantage of many of the discounts available. There are a lot of day-to-day expenses that may offer discounts or relief to people going through various hardships. Utility companies, your cable bill, cell bill, and many more may offer discounts. And the worst that they can say is no. So it is always worthwhile checking in and just asking the question. And speaking of discounts, you can also essentially create your own discount through some insurance providers. A few options would be calling your car insurance company to ask for reduced payments. Now, they are not necessarily just going to go and reduce your payments for you. However, you could ask to increase your deductible, lower the limits on your policy, or just see what other options may be available to help to lower your rates. And when it comes to credit cards, be strategic if you begin tacking on debt. If you start having to go through credit card debt, which happens by the way, first consider just paying off the minimum balances until you start accruing that high interest. And at that time, if you're able to, consider doing a balance transfer. If possible, into let's just say a 0% interest card to postpone that high accrued interest for as long as possible. The only issue here is you do usually need some income to qualify for a balance transfer. So this may not be an option unless maybe your spouse works or you have other sources of income. But no one likes credit card debt. And I never recommend building credit card debt. But if you have to, just know that there are options to minimize the long term effects. And we'll talk about a little bit more of this when we get into the sixth method to free up cash. But in the meantime, when it comes to health insurance, review your options. In many cases, when you lose your position, you are able to maintain coverage through COBRA. Now, this may be advantageous, especially if you received any aid from your former company within the severance package. However, there are other avenues you may want to explore. If you shop, you may be able to find other options that are lower cost, or you may be able to find relief programs that help to lower premiums while in transition. In summary, here, the options you are presented upon termination may not always be the best. So, just like with everything we discuss, spend time looking into alternatives. You'll never know what you find. You'll find. The sixth point is one of the most important, in my opinion, and it's identifying other avenues to receive cash. Now, many people think that your savings and your credit cards are the only sources of cash that you have, but there are plenty of other options that don't involve liquidating investments or building credit card debt. The first I want to talk about is a HELOC. If you own a home equity line of credit, or HELOC for short, is a very attractive way to pull temporary cash from your home to help to pay bills. Typically, these are only interest loans or interest only loans, and the rates associated with them are significantly lower than what you may receive in a credit card. Another option, which is very similar to a HELOC, is a securitized line of credit on your non retirement assets. The last loan option I want to talk about is a solo 401k loan. And if you're wondering what a solo 401k loan is, or even a solo 401k, it is basically the exact same thing as a 401k loan, but it's from a self employed 401k plan vis a vis a solo 401k. The strategy here is to potentially move your 401k funds into an active self employed plan because you are no longer allowed to take a loan from your former 401k plan in most cases. And once the money is now in an active solo 401k plan, you then potentially have the option to take a loan from it. Now, the max amount of the loan is going to be the lower of 50% of your account balance or $50,000. These numbers all change, but that's as of 2023. But all in all, there are a lot of options here to raise cash if needed. And many times, what I recommend is you first start off by using your credit cards and just building some interest free debt there. And then once you begin to pay that higher interest from your credit card loans, then you utilize one of these other more, I would call them extreme, but a little more complicated options to free up cash to then pay down those cards that have high interest. Because ultimately, you're going to save an interest. But enough about point six because we do have five more to go, which leads me to the seventh point, which is starting a consulting business to make money as well as to save money. Now, I'm going to talk about this in greater detail in a few slides. But if you have the ability to do some part time consulting work, not only will you bring in some cash to help to pay your bills, but many times you can also save a lot in taxes as a 1099 employee. And if you've never worked as a 1099 employee, know that it's essentially working for yourself and running your own business. And if you run your own business, typically you have a significant amount of business write offs available to you from a variety of sources. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about this here shortly. So let's just move on to the next point, which is a little extreme, but it still is an option. And that option is to cash out, refinance your home if you have other sources of income that would allow you to qualify for a mortgage. Now, why I say this is a little extreme is because this obviously involves increasing your mortgage balance by pulling cash out of your house permanently rather than temporarily, like in the example of the home equity line of credit. But this is an option. And this is one you'll definitely want to think through and talk to an advisor before executing on because it's not necessarily reversible. Now, the ninth method to free up cash involves identifying securities within your non retirement portfolio that would result in the lowest tax liability if sold, and then selling those to raise cash. And what this would require would be for you to review all of your stocks, all your bonds, all your mutual funds, and exchange traded funds, and then to list them in order of least appreciated to most appreciated. And if you needed to sell securities to raise cash and to pay bills, well, typically you would want to sell the least appreciated securities first that you've held for over 1 year. Now, the reason you'd want to sell securities that you've held for over 1 year is because that those securities that are held for less than 1 year would then be taxed as ordinary income for any gain associated to that position. And speaking of investments, there are tactical strategies that you can also implement within your non retirement accounts to help to raise cash. Most people, myself included, have their stocks, bonds, and mutual funds set to reinvest dividends and interest and capital gains, which essentially means that when a stock issues a dividend, you automatically buy more of that same stock. But one option you can do is to set those securities to pay dividends, interest, and capital gains to cash rather than reinvest. Now, what this would do is it would slowly raise cash in your account over time, which could ultimately be used for your benefit. Just remember, though, to reset them back to reinvest once you're employed. And this is only applicable to non retirement accounts because with the retirement account, any dollar you draw from it is going to be taxed as ordinary income, unless, of course, it's a Roth retirement account. And lastly, there are options to free up cash flow for the future, which are to execute on tax planning strategies to save money on your upcoming taxes when you file. Now, there is a lot that you can do, but from an investment standpoint, one of the best things that you can do is to tax loss harvest in your non retirement accounts. And essentially, what this is selling positions that are currently at a loss in your portfolio to either offset gains, which create a tax, as you know, or to offset up to $3,000 of taxable income per year. And if you have losses that you don't use in this calendar year to offset gains and then offset $3,000 of income, then you essentially just carry those losses forward to the next year. And once carried forward, they are utilized in the next year. And if there's more to roll over, they're rolled over to the next year. And then the process continues until you have used all of your losses. But that about sums up the 11 areas of freeing up cash. And I know we spent a lot of time on this slide, but these are all very important to know and to understand. And while we're on the topic of things you can do to free up cash flow, I wouldn't be doing you all justice if I didn't talk about some of the things you should be avoiding when making adjustments to your lifestyle. And obviously, life changes while you are in transition. You may be watching your budget a little more closely. You may be executing cash flow strategies like we just talked about. And in general, your lifestyle is going to be adjusted. But there are a few things that you should avoid. The first being that you should not completely cut out all of life's luxuries now that you are in transition. Obviously, if cash flow is tight, you may want to make adjustments, but don't completely stop doing what you love to do and what makes you happy, even if it means spending money that you don't fully have. While in transition, you need to keep a positive attitude, and that is going to help you find that next position. And by continuing to do what you love to do, you'll be more likely to maintain a positive outlook, which will add to your, or excuse me, which will aid to your search for employment. Additionally, do not cancel your gym memberships even if they're expensive. Going to the gym clears your head and it's investment in your body and it keeps you sharp. Don't stop investing in yourself. Just like any startup company is going to lose money for the first couple of years, you may need to spend money on yourself to get to where you want to be in years to come. Additionally, don't be afraid to seek professional advice, whether that be an advisor, coach, or someone else. There are people out there that can help you, and do not be afraid to ask them questions. Don't seclude yourself socially. Maintain your social connections and don't be afraid to tell people what your situation is like. Your friends and your family are there for you. And many times, sharing will lead to opportunities that you may not have been expecting. And lastly, of course, do not overwork yourself. There is only so much that you can do when searching for a job, and it does take a lot of time. There's the interview process, there's the application process. It's a lot. So just stay calm, stay relaxed, and just know that everything's going to be okay in the end. So on to the next section then, which is taxes. Now, I've alluded to this earlier that there is a lot of tax strategies that you can execute to lower your tax bill. However, when you are unemployed and no longer working that W 2 job, there typically are more options. So let's discuss what those options may look like. And as I mentioned earlier, one option you have is to start some sort of consulting business. Now, this type of work is considered 1099 income in most cases, which means that you have a lot of tax write off opportunities. Now, in the next slide, I'll review exactly what some of those opportunities are, but in general, it is a lot easier than most people think to execute on. To execute, essentially, all you need to do is to have some sort of self employment income. And when you have income, you generally have business related expenses and they offset. And ultimately, you end up paying a lot less tax, none potentially, than you may have if you were getting that same income from a W 2 position. Now, I'll get into the detail with this, but the hardest thing is just finding the opportunities for consulting income. But if you find those opportunities, I would highly recommend that you act on them, even if it's not what you want to do in the long term. Secondly, from a tax perspective, you will want to strategically plan for your severance package, your accrued vacation, unpaid bonuses, and stock options. Sometimes you don't have much of a say with the first three of those points. However, if you are able to potentially accelerate or delay these benefits, you should definitely do some planning around it because you may be able to save in tax in the long term. For example, if you got laid off in December and immediately have your severance bonus and vacation days paid out, they're going to be taxed during that calendar year when your income was very high because you were working the entire calendar year. On the other hand, if you were able to, let's say, delay those benefits to the following year, then you're starting with a fresh income of zero, which potentially means much less taxes paid on those benefits. Stock options are another benefit to keep your eye on. If, for example, you have a strike price of $1, meaning that the company is allowing you to buy that stock for a dollar when, let's say, the value of the company is 5, well, then when you exercise, it's as if you receive $4 of benefit from the company, which counts as ordinary income. $1 strike price, $5 valuation, $4 benefit on your books. And that income is going to be taxed during the calendar year of execution. So if you have the ability to postpone exercising to the next calendar year, then many times that is when it is most advantageous. Now, those are shorter term tax strategies, but there is always some very attractive long term strategies that you may want to consider as well, one of which is called a Roth conversion. And what a Roth conversion is essentially paying income tax on your pre tax retirement money, for example, your 401k or your IRA, and then moving those funds into a Roth IRA, which is a post tax account. Then the money in that IRA grows tax free for the remainder of your life. And when you withdraw the money, you pay no taxes. Now, you may be asking yourself, why the heck would I want to pay taxes when I'm in transition making less money? Well, the answer lies once again with your tax bracket. Let's just say, for example, that you have been unemployed now for 11 months and it's December and your taxable income for that year is essentially nothing. Well, you could convert a certain percentage of your account and then you'd be paying taxes when you're in that extremely low tax bracket. And you'd still have your standard deductions to utilize, which would count against the conversion. So by converting, you're paying significantly lower taxes on an account that you would likely most likely have paid more down the road in retirement. And then, of course, that money is going to grow tax free forever. Now, I personally utilize this strategy. We use it for clients all the time. And while it may seem a little foreign and a little scary, the long term benefits of it can be a lot. So, dependent on your situation, you may want to consider implementing it. And with any of these strategies, you should also be planning ahead. These are strategic, forward thinking tax strategies. So, don't wait until December to plan for them. Start early, develop a game plan that makes sense for you and your family and your long term plan. And with all that being said, I do want to talk about some of the more details surrounding the first of these bullet points, because this is one of the ways that you can save dramatically in tax while also freeing up cash flow while in transition. And that's just a double benefit to you. Now, like I alluded to earlier, starting a consulting business isn't necessarily complex. The hardest thing about it is just getting clients. But once you have income, you are able to potentially offset that income with business related expenses. And listed here are a few of the many expenses that you may be able to write off, much of which you're probably already paying for. For example, health insurance premiums, cell service, internet service, software subscriptions, printing, home office expenses, rent, for example, and much more of what you're currently already paying for could potentially be used to offset income and pay minimal tax on the money that you bring in. And keep in mind that you're not doing anything wrong here by avoiding tax. This is not illegal. This is just one of the many benefits of running your own business, which is exactly what consulting is. So I'm going to leave it by that, or leave it at that, by saying if you can consult, consider it. And if you begin consulting, start tracking these expenses immediately. And I would always recommend talking with a CPA because it's never a bad idea to get their input ahead of time to ensure you're following all the rules. But with that being said, I'll end the tax conversation and move on to the more investment based conversation. And the first thing I want to talk about is just general market advice. I want to talk about what you shouldn't do and then talk about some of the things that you should consider doing while you're in transition. And the first thing to understand is that nothing has changed regarding your long term retirement and investment planning now that you are in transition. Your IRA, your 401k, and other retirement accounts are still long term investments meant to sustain you during your retirement years. So don't go out and make any rash decisions. With that being said, though, being in transition is emotional, and sometimes your emotions are going to impact your portfolio. And combined with an already elevated emotional state of being in transition, sometimes when portfolios start to drop in value because of some outside market force, many people make those rash decisions and potentially completely sell out of their investments. They may go to cash or they may go into a more conservative portfolio. And they typically do this after the market has already reacted and potentially crashed rather than before, because quite frankly, no one has a crystal ball and no one can time the market. Not me, not Warren Buffett. So, what's the solution then? It's simple. Stick to a strategy or what we call an investment policy statement. Remember, being in transition doesn't necessarily mean you need to change your entire investment portfolio or how you handle your long term assets. You may want to consider making some tactical changes to some of your shorter term positions, but definitely not your long term strategies. Now, for the clients on the line, just know you already have one of these. But for those that are unaware of what an investment policy statement is, it's essentially the guidelines for the general rules of the management of your investment portfolio, both short and long. Overall, what this document is, it's your strategy. And why it is imperative to have one is because it keeps you grounded during times of change and times of volatility. Whether you are in transition, we are going through a recession, or something else is affecting your emotions, an investment policy statement is going to be what grounds you to your long term strategy. And this goes hand in hand with your long term financial plan. Essentially, they work simultaneously together. But my advice for you is if you're in transition, it's fairly simple. Don't make rash decisions regarding your investment portfolio. Think long term and think tactically. And that leads me to the next and the final section, which are investment strategies to consider while in transition. Because sometimes there are areas of opportunity while going through a change of employment. And really, what these are forward looking strategies to help improve your future financial position rather than some of the strategies to help free up cash flow that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar. And I have 6 items for you to consider. And some we've already mentioned, some are related to being in transition, and others are related to having additional free time to work on items that you may have just been holding off. So let's jump right into it. And the first thing I want to discuss is what do you do with your old 401k plan now that you have left your position? And if you're unaware, once you leave a job, you have a few options on what specifically you can do with that retirement plan. You could leave the money where it is, you could move it to a new retirement plan, you could liquidate it completely, or you could move it to a self managed IRA or individual retirement account. And if you choose the third option, essentially what you're doing, or I'm sorry, the fourth option, what you're doing in this instance is you're moving your money from an employer plan to an individual plan that you or your advisor manages. Now, this is a non taxable event because it is going from one retirement account to another retirement account. And the main benefits are that you are now allowed to invest in what's called an open architecture investment platform versus the limited platform, which is your 401k. And the reason this is important is because you're essentially limited in your 401k. There are thousands and thousands of investment options in most self managed IRAs. However, 401ks are generally limited to about 20 to 40 funds. And it's not to say that those are bad investment options whatsoever. But typically, you can build a more efficient investment strategy in an IRA, and sometimes you can save on costs because, quite frankly, there's just more options to choose from, and you can build something that's a little more customized. So while in transition, it's never a bad idea to review or to have your advisor review your 401k to see if there are opportunities to improve upon. The second point is to consolidate accounts where possible. Just like people use springtime to clean up their homes, your time in transition could be strategically used to organize and to clean up your financial accounts. And there are additional benefits other than just having your account slightly more organized to consolidating. You could save in costs potentially through economies of scale. You can see how your accounts, or I'm sorry, you can see all of your accounts and all of your investments under one roof to have a better idea of your overall strategy. And there's more to consolidating as well. But the third point to note, and we've already spoken about this, is to consider looking into Roth conversions. Now, I'm not going to go into all the detail of this again since we already discussed it, but I just want to mention again that if you're in a low tax bracket because of a transition, then it may make a lot of sense to execute on it. Just talk with your advisor or your CPA. And while we're on the conversation of taxes, another area of opportunity is to tax loss harvest in your non-retirement investment account. Now, I mentioned this strategy earlier, but just like Roth conversions, proper execution of this strategy will result in less taxes paid in most cases, and resulting potentially in you having a lot more money in your pocket rather than paying the IRS. So consider these. And the last area of opportunity that I wanted to touch on is to spend this newfound time developing a comprehensive long-term financial plan if you haven't done so already, or just adjust the plan that you currently have in place now that some things have changed with you losing your job. Now, this is fun for me because I'm a financial planner, but this can be stressful to think about. If you're doing it on your own, thinking about your finances, thinking about your future. But once you get that next job, I can tell you this with certainty: life is going to get very busy again. And spending the time now to put together a long term plan may be a very proactive move for you and your family. Planning for retirement, planning for your family's security in the event of a premature death, your long term care, your investment strategy, and much more do go into proper planning. And having those types of conversations early on only are going to enhance the level of security and comfort, knowing that you're doing everything you can do to prepare. But I'll leave it at that, as that is the last point that I wanted to discuss. And I'll close by sharing one of my favorite Warren Buffett quotes. To invest successfully over a lifetime does not require a stratospheric IQ, unusual insights, or inside information. What is needed is a sound intellectual framework for making decisions and the ability to keep emotions from corroding the framework. This quote, while investment focused, also serves as a reminder while in transition. Just like we cannot control the financial markets, we cannot always control our employment. But when you invest strategically and you have that sound framework for making decisions and you leave emotions out of the picture, you can be successful in the long run. The same concept applies when you're looking for that next opportunity. You cannot always control what happens to you or what happens next. However, when you think strategically, make decisions based on material facts rather than emotion, you have a better chance of success, whether that be success with your investments, employment, or something else. Well, with that, I'll say best of luck to you all, whether you're in transition or not. And I'll add, reach out to us directly if you'd like to discuss anything that we talked about today. Whether you're a client or not, our door is always open for a conversation. And as always, to the clients on the line, if you're going through a transition, if you want to talk, reach out to us. Our job is to help you through these times of change. So we're always here for you when needed. But I'll leave it at that and open it up to questions. And for those watching the pre-recorded webinar, we will have to close out now. So thank you for joining. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll open up to questions now.